Welcome to Sassy, Soulful, and Sensitive, the podcast for introverts, empaths, and highly sensitive people. I'm your host, Cam Nichols, and I'm here to guide and explore with you how to tune into your intuition, step into your radical self, and find your voice. If you want to ditch the feeling of being a tortured, out-of-place soul in this great big world, and learn how to speak up for all of your wants and needs and create a more peaceful, content, and empowered life, all while having more fun, keep listening. Hello, hello, my beautiful friends. All right, you guys ready for today? I hope so, because today we're talking about self-care. Who doesn't need a little more self-care, am I right? And one of the first things I want to talk about in regards to self-care is that it doesn't look the same for everybody. And I think for a while now, I don't see this much right now, but I did see for a long time that like self-care had this like negative connotation. And it was self-care is lazy, and like self-care is just like laying on the couch and not taking care of your kids or your family or your life. And you know what? Sometimes that is true, and that's totally fine. But self-care doesn't look the same for everyone, right? For some people, it is just laying on the couch or laying in bed. Some, it's reading a book. Other people, it's going out and going to a movie or going to a play or musical. For other people, it is taking walks around the park or around the block, right? Other people, it's like going to a noisy basketball game. I'm not one of those people, but there are people out there, right? And if you're listening to this, you're probably not one of those people either. But the whole idea is that this self-care does not look the same for every single person. So I think there's a place where we can give ourselves some compassion about what our self-care looks like, about what it is that we need. And you know what? That could change from time to time. One time self-care might be taking a bath, where another time it might be going to hang out with a group of friends, right? So it's not just that self-care looks different for every single person, but it's going to look different depending on what you need. And that is your responsibility to figure out what that is for you, right? No one else can ask or even answer the question of what is it that you need? What is it that you need in order to take care of yourself right now, in this moment, in this day? And I really want to get away from this idea that self-care, regardless of how it looks, but especially those that have like low energy self-care, like taking baths or laying on the couch or watching TV. Like, I want to help rid the world of this idea that it is lazy and selfish. Like, bitch, please. You're going to talk about lazy and selfish? Let me name all the ways. Not really, because why? There's no point in shaming how other people do it. So let's stop shaming ourselves and listening to those other people that shame us for giving ourselves what we need. Like, we just don't need that in our life, right? And it really comes down to learning to rest without judgment. We don't need to judge ourselves for what we're not doing, right? We, in our society, it's so much about go, 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 do, do, do. You're only as good as your next project. You're only as good as your next results. You're only as good as what you do, what you get done, how productive you are. This is not the case. And we need to learn to rest without judgment. And I do think that we are kind of coming into this new world paradigm. Like we're in the middle of the shift where we're starting to realize that the pandemic sounds so serious. Okay, it was serious. But like there's like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And post-pandemic, I think we've all really learned that we need to slow down and figure out what that self-care is. I think like being in the pandemic, being stuck at home, being in isolation, it really kind of taught us where our weak points are as far as caring for ourselves, caring for those that we love. And we had more time to rest than ever before. And people still exhausted themselves, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? There are people who are out there that who are good at going, doing. But I also question, like, those people that are doing that, how much of it is fulfilling versus how much of it is like avoiding sitting with themselves. Because that can be very, very uncomfortable, right? When we're resting, when we're sitting still, when we give our time space, when we give ourselves space and time to just think, all of the judgments are going to come up, right? The judgments that we have about ourselves, the judgments that we've taken on from others, like all of the judgments. But when we really like practice giving ourselves the space and time, see, I did it one take right there. When we practice doing that, like that's when we learn how to really deal with the judgment. We learn to deal with some of those thoughts that come up. And like it's a skill, right? This isn't something that like some people are just magically born with and other people aren't. There are people who, due to brain chemistry or whatnot, that have a harder or more difficult time with managing their thoughts, right? I mean, that's why there's so much clinical depression and anxiety and other mental health struggles. Like, and then there are people out there who have like no empathy or understanding, even sympathy towards mental health and people with depression and anxiety, right? There are those people out there, but most likely, again, if you're listening to this, you're probably not one of those people. You do struggle with a judgment. You do struggle with negative thoughts and going down the negative rabbit holes. And what I love, what I find so funny about these negative rabbit holes, it's like totally the Alice in Wonderland, right? We know that when we go down there, shit's going to get crazy, but we go anyway. Sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not, right? And so when we give ourselves the time and space to give ourselves the self-care that we need, we build that skill of managing our mind and learning to honor and listen to our emotions. And that's what kind of allows us to learn to set up that roadblock instead of going down the rabbit hole when some of those old negative patterns show up. Because really that's kind of what it is, right? It's just anytime we go down a rabbit hole, we're just not stopping ourselves from repeating the same pattern that we have trained ourselves to be. We can complicate it. Right? We can totally like make it really complicated and convoluted, but we can also really make it simple. And that's what this is, right? I think part of self-care is making things simple for ourselves. And when things are simple, we don't have to judge them, right? We can rest and not call ourselves lazy. We can let the dishes sit in the sink. It's going to be okay. And I was actually reading recently an article, I want to say it was something I saw on Instagram from like Washington Post or something, but it was talking about long-term effects of COVID and how they've seen a lot more like chronic fatigue. And one of the ways that people are learning to deal with this, with the chronic fatigue, and this happened before COVID, right? Chronic fatigue has been around for a very long time. But one of the things that really helps in that is how they manage their energy and changing the expectation that they have of how much they can get done, right? And it's really about the value of getting something done that you want to, rather than having to do all of the things. And I think that's really, really important when it comes to self-care as well, because that's where those judgments come in, right? And when we create the time and space for ourselves, especially for those that are empaths and highly sensitive, it is so important when you plan this space and time that you plan to do it by yourself. Like, you're not laying on the couch with the spouse or a friend. Like, you're not doing anything with anybody. You're in a space with your own energy. This is so, so important because as empaths, like in sensitive people, we are sensitive to all the energy around us. Other people just existing, we love them, but like we can sense when someone else is around. It's almost like their aura or electromagnetic energy is like bumping into ours, and we're really sensitive to that. That can be really jarring or off-putting. And so often we kind of just because we're around people so much, especially those who live with our families and spouses and just other people, like we don't get that time to ourselves to just sit in our own energy and figure out what our own wisdom is trying to tell us. And so it's really important that if you do resonate as an empath or a highly sensitive person, that you make sure that you schedule some self-care time alone. And when I say alone, I don't mean like alone going to sit at a coffee shop or alone like going to a park where there's other people, right? It's really about you in your own space and your own energy. And maybe sometimes if you're living with other people, that might just be taking a bath. And that's totally fine, right? Like you need to figure out what that is for you. But self-care is so important, because when we're not able to listen to ourselves and have access to our own inner wisdom, we are basically living life for other people, right? This is when we really get into people pleasing and perfectionism. We have to take self-care seriously for ourselves. We need to care for ourselves and learn to be alone in our energy without judgment, because that is part of what allows us to maintain our mindset and emotional and mental health, for us to live life and help others and fulfill our purpose in helping others, right? Like I've never met an empath or a highly sensitive person that was not about helping other people in some way, right? That is one of the gifts that we have, because we understand people and we want to help them. And so the self-care, if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we don't have like this maintenance plan, it's almost like a car, right? Like when was the last time you changed your oil? Every like 3,000 to 5,000 miles or something like that. I have a plug-in hybrid, so I only have to change it once a year. But like there's certain maintenance that you need to do on the car in order for it to continue to run effectively. And we are no different. We are absolutely no different. And this is why there's so much burnout and we're so tired all the time, and we don't have to be. But that also means we have to kind of stand up for ourselves and take charge of our own self-care. We need to prioritize it. We need to learn to speak up for our own space and our own time, so that we can recharge and have this maintenance process, so that we can just live life more abundantly, more effective, more fun, and really just like helping people and having that's the word that keeps coming to my mind, is like just fun. When you have self-care, you're able to create more fun in your life, right? Fun doesn't look all the same to everyone, just like self-care. Fun does not mean going out to a party or an amusement park or wherever. Sometimes fun is having some tea and reading a book by the fire. Sometimes it's just watching a movie, right? Self-care is fun. So you get to define what that is, and you are the one who gets to figure out what type of fun, what type of self-care is best for you. That is all I have for you today, my friends. As always, shining bright gives others permission to shine as well. Take care. Hey, I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcast, especially if you really liked it. If you didn't like it though, don't even worry about it. Also, head on over to coachwithcam.com, where I have a guided meditation I'd love to gift you, along with 3 of my favorite mini trainings. You'll also be able to see what webinars or programs or other offerings I have coming up. And when you're ready to explore the depths of your beautiful soul, I invite you to come work with me one-on-one for 6 months. This is where you discover and harness the magic that already exists within you, your voice, so you can create whatever the hell it is that you want on your terms. Change how you show up for yourself in this world, then go out and change the world.